Good day, good people in the world of tone. I'm very excited to bring to you an old friend of mine. I've probably known Chris Van Tassel from J Rockett. I don't know, how long would you say, Chris? 10 years, maybe more? 12 years?
Probably
Something like that. You were definitely
bad.
maybe Texas, maybe San Diego. I forget where you were when we first met.
Yeah, I think that was probably Texas. So that would have been somewhere around 2004 or 5
Yeah, yeah.
range, I would guess.
Yeah, you know who actually introduced us was a great guitar player from the Santa Barbara area named Dana Olson, who was a big
Yeah.
fan of all the pedals. And I remember like the early days of like having some Rocket demos that were like on YouTube or something like that that almost looked like they were filmed on an over the shoulder camcorder. Or something like that, that he was featured on. But yeah, Chris and I have known each other for a while, and I'm really excited today to talk to Chris about the Archer and some of their other pedals. And the main reason why I'm sort of singling out the Archer is, and I like doing these platitude statements. I think I speak for everybody when I say this, even if they don't think that, is that I think that the Archer is one of the most accurate representations of a Klon that's in existence. I think whether you're talking about, you know, the magical diodes, or you're talking about just fidelity to the circuit, and then I think on top of that, just layering in the pedal board friendliness of the design, it makes it on to a tremendous amount of boards. And when you're looking at guys who are Klon evangelists and they need to have a backup to their prized unit, whether we're talking about a John Mayer or a Jeff Beck, they either choose the Rockett as their number one alternate or have actually replaced, in some cases, their original with the Archer because of its fidelity. So that in and of itself is quite a feat. But I think before we get into this list that I have here about what a major guitar publication considers to be the best Klon replicas of 2024, I'd just like to hear from you, Chris, with your experience with the circuit, and you've had, you know, experiences from multiple angles, and I don't know how much or how little you want to get into that, but I'd just like to know, for the good people out there, what would you say like differentiates the really great versions or replicas of clones from ones that are not as good? Like, what are sort of the X factors that need to be in place in order to really nail that sound, in your opinion?
Oh boy, that is certainly a lot of factors. The one thing that we did learn early on, because we did the first 1500 KTRs for Bill Finnegan, um, which means
Cool.
we got exposed to the actual schematic, everything the right way, because that's how he wanted it. Not that the KTR is accurate to the original Klon sound, because it's not. Um, but there's a schematic that goes around the internet that I think a lot of people build off of, and it's probably 90% there. But I'm sure you've heard stories about Bill. The way he markets kind of went to that unobtainium approach, and got people to buy in that way. Not that Klon isn't a great pedal, but there was kind of like a Dumble thing, right? There was you he would interview people, and he would deny selling Klons to people at the beginning if you weren't somebody he felt would represent the product, right? So he did a good job of that. But as far as the builds go, he built in some hidden traces and a few things that are not noticeable if you were to reverse engineer. It's not visible to the naked eye, and so he kind of shared some of those little secrets with us. And ultimately, that's what ended up being the Archer. And it's funny because Mark Sampson is one of our designers, and he had me send over the schematic. He took a look and he said, this whole design is just a happy accident. He said that you take the input resistor off, you're gonna have squealing like you wouldn't believe, big bad oscillation. He said he put that on there as a band-aid, and that's kind of what gave it its magical mid-range sound. Kind of interesting to
Yeah.
hear, but
That's crazy.
I think some of the best products come out of something like that. happy accidents. But yeah, as far as being accurate to the original, man, I don't know. I guess you could build it using all the identical componentry, because I do know there is a difference between an Archer and an original Klon, because he's using the big, I think, 20 millimeter pots. I think they were CTS pots, and then we're using the little 9 millimeters, and you've got pot tolerances, you've got all sorts of things. But I do know that the schematics that float around out on the internet are not correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably be my best guess as to why.
And you've had, I mean, I didn't know a lot of what you just said, hidden traces and the fact that you guys were actually building for Bill. So you have experience that I would assume just about nobody else has. Like everyone speculates and people like, I think it's this and it's always the diode and it's, you know, this thing that he could only get access to in the 90s or whatever it is. But you aren't speculating, you know, firsthand. And I think that's a pretty cool you know, perspective, opportunity, experience to be able to have and bring into your own pedal design. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you ever did want to make improvements or tweaks, you're doing it from a place of a lot more, for lack of a better use of words, full understanding of the context of what you're actually trying to tweak. You know, that's incredible. That's a really cool backstory I've never actually heard before.
And, you know, full credit to, we'll always admit that we kind of rode the coattails of Bill Finnegan on that one. But, you know, we built the first 1500. He decided to go have them made elsewhere. And we had a lot of excess inventory. And we didn't agree on the direction of the KTR. We thought it should pay more homage to the original. And that's what we kind of tried to do, is make it an efficient build for obviously an affordable price with accurate results. So, you know, we went with the same gold and the same silver colors, or at least in general, tried to, you know, pay some respects to the original. But at the end of the day, I don't think Bill was trying to recreate a Klon. I know that he worked with Paul Cochran to design that switch on the side that makes buffered input or true bypass, and where it said almost always better, almost always worse.
Yep.
And so when you introduce any new feature on a pedal, you're going to risk that pedal not sounding exactly like the original, obviously. But you know, we felt that the KTR was a little overpriced, and we just kind of wanted to do it our way. And you know, to your point that you just made earlier, that's kind of how Jeff Beck ended up with that Jeff Beck version of the Archer. Is he was playing the Archer, the regular Archer, and I was just messing around one day with an Archer and started changing some of the parts in the audio path, including diodes, and I came up with a combination that I thought sounded better than the original Klon. So I sent it to Jeff Beck, and he loved it, and so he had us build him like 7 or 8 of those, and that's what he used up until he passed away. And you know, so it's not to say that the pedal can't be improved, but then again, it's all subjective anyway, you know. But it was definitely a great thing to happen for us, you know, the association with him. And his words were simply this: he was not the guy to sit and talk tone. He would rather talk motorcycles or cars. But he usually tried to walk away when he started talking guitar tone. But he just said to me, he goes, "The Archer's just more efficient." Those were his words, and just because it's small. And personally, I do have an original Klon, still have the one that we used to design against sonically, and no way would I put that on a board if I had something like an Archer, because you know I can replace it 25 times if they get stolen. So it's a good solution. And you know, it's funny because I see some of these shows like That Pedal Show, and they review a Klon clone, and they're always like, "Oh God, another Klon clone." And it has kind of become that way, and it's less mysterious. You know, the sound was, you know, getting that sound was so mysterious when it was just the first original Klon. And you know, frankly, it was expensive back then. I think they were $249 somewhere in the early 90s, and that was expensive, but not compared to some of the stuff in today's market, that's for sure.
Chris,
Chris,
could you move your mic out just a little bit? I think it's rubbing against your beard. There it is.
Yeah.
There you go.
Here, I could do this.
Oh boy.
Oh my gosh.
It just
I'll
it
try to
just
do
sounded
that.
like somebody was trying to open like a bag of Ruffles at the same time you were talking.
Well, I was eating chips. Let me know if you're hearing it again, because it's probably just
Can you
my.
move your head and talk a bit?
You want me to do some dancing?
Just a little bit. Yeah, it's rubbing quite a bit.
Yeah, there
How
you
about
go.
there?
There you go.
There
There
we
you
go.
go. There you go.
Yeah,
That's
do some
thumb on
jumping
there.
jacks.
that solved it.
That's
So
perfect.
so in
Thanks.
your opinion, Chris, and I'm just reiterating I think what you already said, that the KTR really is not a direct replacement for a Klon Centaur. It's kind of evolved. In as far as like the tonal aspects from your perspective, what are kind of the main differences that you heard between the original Klon and the KTR, kind of knowing how the sausage is made, so to speak?
Yeah, I kind of felt like the original circuit, the original Klon, whether it's an Archer or a Klon, it kind of lets your guitar be its, its own identity. Like if you're playing a telly through it, you can tell you're playing a telly. Same with the Strat or Les Paul. Whereas I felt like the KTR was more like a distortion pedal. It just kind of overtook your tone and your feel. It wasn't a bad sounding pedal to me. It just wasn't a Klon. I think he tried to match the mid range that a Klon has, but the feel and the overall clipping just wasn't the same, in my opinion. I felt like it was less organic and more processed sounding.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think that this is sort of most of us who are familiar with the sound, or at least think that we're familiar with the sound, we probably have never played in the same room an original Klon compared to a KTR, or even two original Klons against each other, because, as you said, with the CTS pots and stuff like that, even though those are fine pots, whether they're 9mm or not, you're still going to have a pretty significant tolerance difference from one to the next. And so these things are going to influence the sound. And I think that when, just like with any pedal comparison, whether it's tube screamers or Klons, if you set all the knobs to the exact same place, you're not necessarily going to get the same tone because of that. And so there's some people that will isolate one as being better than the other, not understanding that the same position of the knobs is not necessarily going to yield the same tone, no matter what pedal it is. There's always going to be some differences there.
Or amp or anything, really. I mean, that's just the tolerance differences you have to deal with. But I do always tell people, if they get one that they say doesn't sound the same, and they're, comparing it to like having all the knobs at noon.
Yeah.
I do explain to them, there is a 20% tolerance. So you can make it sound the same. You're just going to probably have to push a knob or two to a different spot.
Yeah.
But it is interesting in the pedal world to analyze, people's buying habits. They do a lot. They buy with their eyes. They'll buy.
We talk about that quite a bit on the show, actually.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important. Believe me, I don't want a stupid looking pedal on my board, but then again, some people don't care. But they buy with their eyes, and then they also get used to pedal settings being consistent like that. And that's just something you do have to explain to people. Sorry, I got attacked by a rogue squirrel. I don't know if you saw that. It looked like a fly, though. Anyway, so they get used to that, and then if you explain it to them, they're like, "Okay, I get it." But some people just have OCD about that, and if your knobs aren't where you're used to, they get freaky about it.
This is why the Maxon SD9 is so controversial, because you basically have to turn the tone knob off, and people like just mentally can't do it.
Yeah,
they're like, I just can't do it. It has to be at noon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that was the same with the Timmy. The Timmy, you were always reducing, or you were always cutting rather than adding
the
or subtracting.
And the knobs are inverted, basically.
Yeah, and that always messed with my head as well. But then once someone, same like what you were saying, Chris, once someone explains, like it all just unlocks. Like, oh, okay. And I wasn't. This was 10 years ago. I wasn't getting the sound from my ears. I was getting the sound from a visual on the pedal. It's like, this doesn't sound right. And I wasn't smart enough, maybe I'm still not, to just figure it out by just closing my eyes and twisting knobs. Like, okay, there's the sound. It's all there. I just needed that visual. Unfortunately, I needed that visual.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when we were originally designing it, we knew how important it was for it to be just spot on, or at least as spot on as we could get. So I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Britt. He does a lot of the Kemper stuff.
Yeah.
And Mike's got a great ear. Obviously, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. I think we went through, I don't know, 30 clones. And then we did a whole bunch of blind testing where we would just have people come over and play and then go, which one is it?
Yep.
And it's funny because to watch people, they would get upset if they picked something that wasn't a clone.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh.
They would get upset. Well, that can't be right. You get that kind of a thing. But at the end of the day, you could tell the difference if you went in knowing what the differences were. But then if you swapped out another clone or another Archer, it was back to the drawing board, right? Just like Mason was saying, no two really ever sound alike. And that's the case with pretty much anything. I have a guy who rents an apartment from me, and he's got 4 original Dumbles, got a Trainwreck Liverpool. I mean, all these unbelievable amps, probably 15 Camerons, Larry amps, Hermansons. I mean, you name it. I mean, it's a serious collection. And he's got Howard's second ultraphonics that he ever made. He was good friends with Howard, so Howard personally made him a clone of his ultraphonics amp, which was cool. So we've really been able to spend a lot of time, getting to know these 4 styles of Dumbles. I had never played an original Trainwreck Liverpool. I can't believe how aggressive they are. I have a clone of an Express, and it was aggressive, but I found the Liverpool to be way more aggressive. More fun to play, in my opinion. But it's kind of the case with everything. If I took 2 Liverpools, 2 ultraphonics, 2 whatever, they're just not going to sound the same. And we've done the comparisons with several, and it always yields the results you would expect. And it could be different in a good way, different in a bad way, but again, that's all subjective, right? You might like it one way versus the other. So they're all fun to experiment with, and I think they do all have a basic DNA built into them, just due to the circuit. But it just comes down to what you prefer. Sorry, I'm getting attacked by hornets and squirrels.
Oh man.
No, you're good.
It's a dangerous life there in Nashville.
I know. It's very wild here.
Yeah, I always think it's crazy how like people, like you were talking about, like all pedals, like the knobs settings and everything. Like people, like when I worked at a guitar shop near me, people would come in and set the knobs exactly at this exact photos of their boards, and they would be like, I'm like, well, what are you doing? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm making sure that it sounds the same way as this other pedal. I'm like, they're gonna have a little bit of characteristic difference. It's just interesting to see how people, like, for whatever reason, everyone kind of thinks, oh, well, all the knobs are going to be the same, all of whatever are going to be the same, when it's not the case. I guess my camera keeps shutting off. But it's an interesting. It's cool to hear, like, where you talked about how close you guys tried to get everything. Because I remember when Bill, I think he released like a YouTube video or something with this like box he made where he was switching between some original clones with the KTRs. It's when they removed the battery, like the battery clip or something inside, and I know they were changing the diode, or they were changing a certain diode or whatever, and I swear everyone freaked out when they heard that the battery clip was being removed. Like people were like going crazy, and it's cool to hear how close you guys have gotten them too. Like you tried to mimic it and everything. So, but yeah, it was always interesting to see how he would try to like A, B, and C them, and like he would not let you see them, and it's always the same things. Like no one could ever pick it. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and I know
cool.
that he claims that the original diodes were the 1N34As, but I think Mason knows better than that. But that's part of the reason why we came out with that Archer Select, because it gave you the ability to compare the diodes, and you realize, wow, they really don't have that much of an influence. Yet that's what made the Klon so legendary.
Interesting.
And they only have an influence when you're driving, clipping, and you'll hear volume differences, and you'll hear subtle differences in tonality. But most people don't run a Klon that way. They usually run, the gain at about 10 o'clock and the output at about 2 o'clock. And you're barely hearing any clipping going on. So you could put any
Yeah.
diode you want in there, and I guarantee you're not going to hear the difference.
If you listen really carefully, guys, right now, you can hear a bunch of people's worlds falling apart after you said that. Just crumbling. The diodes, they don't make that big of a difference.
I think that too, the attribution, if there were any, it would be, and I've said this a lot, I think it would be more related to leakages than anything. Like, not that it was a certain model number or diode or anything like that. But yeah, I think that the Select is a good proof for that, for I think people that are kind of wondering the influence of that particular component. And also, speaking of how it's run, I think you and I both know Mark Lettieri, a guitar player, a Bay Area guitar player. But at the time, he was more of a session guy in LA, and he was one of the demonstrators for Klon Siberia LLC, or whatever the real company name is that makes the Centaur. We always refer to it as Klon, but it would be like saying the J Rockett, not the Archer, right? That's like the thing that all of us say is because he only made one pedal. But I guess so for the demonstrations, the way that Mark was instructed to show people in a trade show setting how to listen to the pedal was that they would turn the gain to the LED. And so pretty low gain at that point. And then like output obviously to taste and tone to taste. So the way that they were showcasing what made the Klon stand out, it was almost like it was a boost and not really a drive section at all. Because all of us know if you had a Klon with the gain point or the LED, you're talking about like, I don't know, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, something like that in terms of the gain setting. So pretty low. That was very surprising to me. I don't know if you've heard this or if you've seen any sort of instruction on how Finnegan recommends setting the Klon. Have you heard this before in terms of how the recommended settings were relayed to the end user when in the early days of the Klon?
Not specifically, but I do know that was usually the case, is running the gain at about 10 o'clock, the output at about 2 o'clock. So I'm sure that kind of came from Bill's influence.
Yeah,
I would guess.
So interesting. There'd be so much more gain available,
face, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people don't like the gain on a Klon. I hear that a lot. They don't like the mid-range thing. And it's funny when you break down a Klon, the way that it's built, it's an interesting design in that, Bill's partner was an MIT engineer, and he passed away. But the design, it's just basically a big muff boost, and then they add a drive section to it. And the way that they implemented that is, it's like two pedals in one, and you've got a dual gang pot, and one side is reverse wired, so that when you're turning up the overdrive, you're actually turning down the boost in essence, right? So there's like a mix point, and it usually happens right around 10 or 11 o'clock, depending on your tolerances, that it kind of blends the boost and the drive, to an appealing tonal space, so to speak. And I think that's where it kind of took off, because once you start getting out of that boost territory and going into all overdrive, it tends to get really nasally and mid-rangey. But it's not far off from kind of a plexi frequency. A little bit less of the squawk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting design, and you have to give whomever designed it full credit for something unique, because as you know, we rack our brains every day to come out with something new, something unique, something different, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do, and then also become an accepted product, because if you get too far outside of the box, people just don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would the Archer be similar? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Would the Archer be similar as far as the blending of the two circuits? As one is increased, the other is decreased. Is it kind of in that realm as well?
Yep. Oh, it's identical. It's okay. It's an absolute 100% clone. And where you're going to hear differences is what we were discussing earlier, in just tolerances of potentiometers and internal parts and stuff like that. But for the most part, yeah, it's a Klon through and through.
Yeah. Very cool.
Chris, if you were to let's just pretend for a moment that the Archer was not a J Rockett product, that you didn't have any sort of Klon representation. Are there any others in the marketplace that you would say you've seen do a good job in the replication of it, or do you feel like there are always some missing pieces just because they're not privy to the same information that you guys had in the creation of the Archer?
Yeah, I would be inclined to say that, unless somebody found out one way or another, I know Bill's pretty tight-lipped about that stuff. I would say that most likely none of them are 100% accurate, but I can't say that for sure. I haven't spent a whole lot of time playing other Klon clones.
Right.
I know we got a couple guys here locally. Do you know Greg Timmons by chance? Greg used to be the marketing guy for Lawler Pickups. Yeah. So Greg moved out here, and his son is working for Mythos. And I think Mythos does a pretty good job on their stuff. I haven't spent much time with one, but I think everybody that's putting a pedal out, I give them credit. You go into the gear page, you go into these different places, and you can get lambasted for the smallest thing. I get guys tell me all the time, you're overpriced, you're this, you're that. Why didn't you do it this way? And it's like, we're doing our best to provide products for people to enjoy. It's not like we're trying to go out there and, piss people off with what we design, but we design to our own ears and hope that it translates. And I think that that's what other companies are doing as well. It's not to say that there isn't another Klon clone sonically that's dead on, that's accurate, because there's some great designers that are great players that can hear through that stuff. But I just haven't spent a whole lot of time playing others.
Yeah,
I'm kind of like that guy. It's like I got into the pedal world because I was so into pedals, and now I'm like, I don't even want to see another pedal.
Well, Chris, I want to talk to you about kind of where you see the direction of the industry going. But before we do, I want to break for a moment to talk about some of the sponsors that make the podcast possible.
Sure.
Yeah, so the first of two sponsors are going to be the guys over at the Guitar Sanctuary in McKinney, Texas. They have all sorts of pedals in stock. I mean, anything you can think of from A to Z. They have the types of pedals in stock, from guitar amps and acoustics, electric, bass, everything that you need. They got it covered. Go check them out at guitarsanctuary.com, or send them a text or an email, and they'd be happy to help you out. So go check them out. Next are gonna be the guys over at Neural DSP, and if you don't know who Neural DSP is, they have the Quad Cortex. So they are best well known for their plugins, which I've recently discovered and am a huge fan of for all my recording stuff for amps and cabs. But they just did the Core OS update to allow their plugins to be migrated onto their Quad Cortex. So a lot of bands have been utilizing the Quad Cortexes for all their touring needs, and they also use plugins. So now you can load two of their plugins, the Gorgera and the Pliny, onto the Quad Cortex, and with the rest of the plugins coming shortly to actually be able to load on, which is super exciting to hear. So go use the discount code Chairmen, CHAIRMEN, for 30% off all their plugins that are older than 90 days. So once you hit that 90 days, if there's a new plugin before that, obviously it's not going to be available, but go use that code, get a discount, and then you'll have that already. So when they release the plugins onto the Quad, you can load it. So go check them out at neuraldsp.com. You won't be disappointed.
Thank you. All right. So Chris, where do you see, based on sort of the information that's coming at us a mile a minute, we got AI, we got, quad cortexes, we got all sorts of stuff. We have, the all the capturing of that sort of stuff in the Tone X and all that. Given where we are now, what do you think the ecosystem is going to look like in a decade?
Well, it's tough. Years ago, kind of started my whole music experience in the recording industry, and I was kind of there during the transition of analog to digital. And digital started out pretty poor. and then it eventually got to an acceptable point, and a lot of people just abandoned analog gear to go all digital. And I completely understand the conveniences of digital on every level, but sonically it was just never there. Over the years, it certainly has gotten better. But what I saw in the recording industry is they went full rubber band, right? They went analog over here, then snapped over to digital for a while, and then that rubber band kind of came back, and then it eventually settled in the middle. You know what I mean? I kind of have a feeling that's what's going to happen with the guitar industry. Um, there's always going to be the guy that loves analog, that will do nothing but analog. And there are the guys that here in Nashville, you've got a lot of the touring guys that want an Axe Effects or a Neural DSP or some sort of digital source because of travel, convenience, consistency in sound, and all that fun stuff. So I get it, but I know most of them aren't. They're not sitting there playing through their digital rigs to be inspired,
Mm-hmm.
And I find that some of the better sounds that are happening out there are an amalgamation, the combination of digital, analog, and whatever else might be available. But I don't think it's ever just going to go all digital. I think we'll lose a lot if that ever happens. I think there's always going to be a world for pedals, and I think there's always going to be a world for just general analog. Maybe it won't be as popular. Maybe we won't, as pedal companies thrive. But I feel like we're trying to bob and weave, so to speak, and stay with the times. But as you know, Mason, having a DSP engineer on board is for the small guys just financially almost impossible. Yeah. They command a lot of dough, but that's why Strymon and all these companies have such amazing products, because they're a bunch of ex-Line 6 guys. They were engineers. They know how to do this stuff. And props to all those guys that have made that happen, because, I know that I have a big pedal board full of analog and digital gear, and the digital does certain things way better than analog. If I'm going for a certain sound, sometimes, a dark analog delays is what I'm going for, but digital can recreate that in a lot of ways. So it makes it convenient, but I guess that would be my best assessment where I think it's going to go. I think it's going to snap back to the middle at some point.
Yeah. So do you feel like we're getting toward the edge, though, of like kind of what the digital or how much digital somebody might have, or do you think it's going to go quite a bit further before it rubber bands back?
I think we're getting to the point where I don't know that we can make it sound any better, or at least is it going to be enough of a difference for people to go, oh, I got to keep going further. I think it's to the point where it's acceptable. It can be good in a lot of scenarios. Maybe it gets so good that analog is just completely replaced, but I just think there's too much of a random nature to analog to ever be replaced by digital unless they pre-program randomness,
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say.
It is kind of one of the things I appreciate about analog, and I think at least my interpretation when I hear people say that you get inspired by analog, like analog pedals, delays, whatever it is. Inspiration is a common word that is used, and at least from my experience, is it's in the flaws of analog that you find the inspiration. It's in the like, oh, when I put the knobs this way, this DM2 starts to oscillate, and I can still play and make something musical, and like just things that will not naturally happen in a digital environment. And same for overdrive and clipping. Like there's these settings you can find, usually haphazardly or by accident, and it forces you to play something different. And I think that's the thing I just love about it. And I think Brian would be the same. Me and Brian both build pedalboard rigs as part of our job, setting up boards. And these days, for me, I don't know, Brian, if it'd be the same for you, high 90% are mixed boards, some digital effects, a lot of analog effects, and people just, they struggle to replace analog effects, usually in the drive section. Yeah. There's just something about it that you just can't, it can't quite easily be replicated in the same way. And I couldn't be happier about it, because I love having pedals in front of me. I love it. I love having digital pedals in front of me as well. But I think that combination right now where we're at is something that is, it's just really fun to be able to use and turn some knobs and get random sounds at times, and so I haven't thought about the rubber band thing. I hope that's the case, because I love the combination, but part of me would be really sad if the absolute norm, if it was rare, let's say, to find someone with analog gear, I'd be pretty disappointed by that. I really
funny.
hope it doesn't happen.
I had somebody kind of term it the best. It was the most profound way for me to look at it, at least just based on my experience in the music industry, and that was through the recording industry. It's when the click track became, a mainstay, a staple in the recording industry. I won't say who it is, but a very famous drummer said the click track just has ruined music. And I'm like, okay. And he explained it to me. And he said, perfection is exactly the opposite of the artistry that you're trying to convey. And that's what it does. It takes the humanness out of rhythm. I recorded a record years ago for this guy, and it was a piano tune. And it was just him sitting at the piano playing. No click track, no metronome, nothing. Just played. And his body, his voice, his performance, everything had its own rhythm. And that's what made the song send a chill down your spine. You know what I mean? It gave it life. It gave it humanness. And then he went and he recorded that song up at a professional studio in LA. He even had Vinnie Colaiuta playing drums on it, right? And it just became sterile, lifeless. It didn't have the same effect as just the piano performance with no click track. And so today, right, it's enabling convenience on so many levels, where you can email stems and have somebody lay down a guitar solo or a rhythm track. You can cut and paste. You only have to do one good performance of that particular chorus, and they'll just cut and paste it. Years ago in the recording studio, before they had automated faders, you would have a band learning the performance in terms of mixing. You'd have everybody with their finger on a fader, and you would have to perform the mix. Like the drummer knew that the snare needed to come up in this one section or whatever. And that it had so much human influence on it that I think the results that it yielded is still the best music today. You go back and listen to Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, any of those guys, man, they were experimenting with music. There was no click track. They were just, letting the drugs be the influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's very true. Especially like I mainly play church at a church, and there's been times where like the band, it's like, oh, we have to stick to the click, or let's do this or whatever. And sometimes like if it just feels like, how do I explain it? Like I like dynamics. So I'm like, it feels like a roller coaster, like in a way. I was like, guys, it feels like we're on a roller coaster that literally just does that, just goes straight. There's no dips, there's no curves, there's no whatever loop-de-loops. And I was like, let's try this without the click. Let's try this without the tracks. And we did it, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that just dynamically felt really good. It just felt really like airy, and in a way, like click tracks, even like, and weirdly enough, how I'm gonna correlate this to like digital overdrives. That's kind of how it feels for me. Like when you like people like they get the option paralysis in a way of all these different, like you have 52 overdrives in one pedal, and you're like, I need one tube screamer sound. Like I do not need 52 tube screamer sounds. So in a way, it's kind of lifeless, like you were saying, even like with the click to and everything. So yeah, no, I think that's a really cool, like how am I trying to say this? Like what you're trying to explain about that exact click track and everything, because it doesn't feel natural. It feels like, yes, perfection is a nice thing to have, but sometimes it's like, that's the fun thing about music, about playing guitar, is that the experimenting and stuff. So I love what you just said.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, digital zeros and ones, right? Kind of like, I'm a big hi-fi guy, and somebody asked me, does vinyl really sound better than digital? And I always go back to the subjective thing, but Mark Lettieri can probably tell you about this. We when I lived in Dallas, we would have these like listening parties, and people would bring guitars, amps, but we also listened to hi-fi. And we got onto it one night with Dave King from Naylor Amps, and he goes, all right, I have this fully remastered CD. And he goes, I want to compare it to your vinyl. So we put it up so that we could just switch between vinyl and digital, but we got all the volumes the same. We tried to place them on the track the same. All I had to do was flick a switch. And it was amazing. Dave sits down, we're listening to the CD, and it sounds great. It really does. And then I clicked the vinyl, and you could just see his whole face just dropped, because this is just my own personal philosophy on this, is that zeros and ones don't convey vibration. And I think as just organic creatures, we resonate, we vibrate. That's probably what plugs into our emotions better than anything. And when you're listening to a needle in a vinyl groove, you're getting vibration as well as your, sonic delivery. And I think that you feel the music with analog and you hear the music with digital. Sometimes you can't put your thumb on why you appreciate one over the other, but that's just kind of my own personal philosophy, because when we design our pedals, we don't design to frequencies per se. We design to solely how it feels, because if it feels good, you're going to want to play.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But, yeah. So that's kind of my philosophy with, kind of a skewed, preference for analog, not because, hey, go buy Rockett pedals because they're analog, but I just think that's a great way to kind of look at them. And you take a delay like, I don't know, the Strymon timeline, something that gives you every option under the sun. They're amazing, but I really would like to question people that use them and ask them, how many different delay sounds do you use out of that thing? And I would suffice to say it would probably be 3.
Yep.
Long delay, slap back, medium delay, maybe some modulated, effects here and there, whatever it might be. Church scene might be different than the rock scene, but for the most part,
exactly.
I think these delays offer so much more than anybody's ever going to use. It's kind of like driving a Lamborghini on the streets. You're just never going to be able to, push it to its fullest.
But boy, does it look cool.
It does. And it's no, and I'm not bagging on Strymon at all. I think their stuff's great, but I'm such a simpleton. I just want knobs. Like, even our design philosophy changed. We used to make those Pro Series pedals, but we had a bunch of toggle switches on there. And we finally realized that the more options you give people, the more options they have to be disappointed. I think the simplicity of it all, just kind of staying in its lane, tends to be more appealing.
One question I have
it
for
also
you,
goes back.
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Sorry, you go, Mason.
No, I'm taking the thread. I'm taking it away from this thread. So if yours is still on this topic, you go, and then I'll chime in.
Okay, I'll be brief. I'll be super brief here. I think it also speaks to what you're saying earlier about analog versus digital, which we're kind of on that topic. But to elaborate more on the point of people, I include myself in this. People think they want options, but when you are, and we've talked about this briefly on the podcast in the past, but when you have limitations, and creativity is really allowed to thrive. So when you have 2 overdrives on your board with 3 knobs each, and maybe it's an 808 and a Klon, and I really need a rat sound, you're going to have to figure out how you can get as close as you possibly can with what you have in front of you. And that's where, in my opinion, the creativity is really allowed to, come to life. Whereas the easy thing is, well, I'll just add a rat in there. And maybe that's the right answer sometimes, but I would 9 times out of 10 rather struggle to find the sound and eventually end up maybe close, but get something new, than to just give myself the easy solution right away and just bypass the struggle.
I think you're 100% right. And we actually kind of had an impromptu demonstration of that. We were Warwick used to be our distributor, and we were out in Germany, and we were doing basically the Warwick show, which is kind of like a mini NAMM show, and all the Eastern Bloc dealers would come through. And next to our booth was a digital company, I won't say who, and they were, going through all these crazy effects, and they sounded amazing. And so we decided, okay, we knew the guy that was demoing them, so we kind of wanted to mess with him. He's a friend of ours. And so we said, let's see if we can match the sounds that he's getting by combining different pedals.
Yeah.
And so you could see him go through his pitch, and then he'd go, and here's that sound. And then we'd tweak something, and then we'd play the same sound, and he'd look over at us like, he knew we were screwing with him. But we were actually able to recreate some sounds that we never thought we could, but by experimenting, and it sounded better. It sounded richer, more full. It just was a better representation of whatever sound they were going for. And we even surprised ourselves with that. So you're 100% right. It's, like look at Eddie Van Halen. He had to just kind of adapt because he didn't have any money. And what he did with his guitars and the things that he just forced upon a guitar, he created an entire new approach to playing the guitar. And can anybody say there's a better tone, And he wasn't relying on effects. He wasn't relying on a lot of things. Now, he made his signature with things like a Phase 90 and tape delays and things like that. But for the most part, it's just a simple rig. And man, he was a master at making certain sounds and the best iteration of that certain sound. Like you think about how he used a flanger. I don't think I've ever heard anybody use one in a more musical way. The way he used a phaser, the way he used delays. I mean, he was just unbelievably creative with very limited tools.
Or you just step on it for just an effect, like with like Ain't Talking About Love or something like that, like where you just like step on it just for an emphasis point and then, release. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Chris, my question for you as a pedal manufacturer, and we've talked to other pedal manufacturers to this end, and I'm curious what your perspective is in the world of analog overdrives, which is primarily, I think, where both of us have had most of our pedals have kind of lived in that particular environment. When somebody says in the analog domain that they have an original pedal, something that is one of a kind, never been done before, how seriously do you take those claims in the analog world?
Well, I mean, I can't say that they're wrong because, they could change out a cap value and say that nobody's ever done that,
Right.
But are people coming out with something just utterly unique? I would say yes, they are. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, it doesn't sound very good. You know what I mean?
I didn't think you were going to go that way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and we're guilty of it. We've tried to think outside the box and do something totally unique, or at least that we are aware of. And 9 times out of 10, we're like, yeah, it's really cool and it's really unique, but I would never play it, Yeah. So I wish I could think of something in particular. Well, I can't. There's a really funky reverb pedal out there. It looks amazing. And I bought one. Like I said, buy with the eyes, right? I was a victim to myself there. And I bought one and I just couldn't make it sound good on any level. But it still looks cool and I still have it. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure.
Piece.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, yes, everybody's doing an overdrive, based on a 4558 or 4580 or whatever op amp, or they're doing JFETs or some sort of iteration of what's already been done 1,000 times in the past. But it doesn't mean that they can't make it, voice to their ear or something unique. So I think everybody is trying to do something that suits their taste. But yeah, I don't think there's too much uniqueness going on. We're guilty of it too.
Could I be, can I ask a possibly cynical question then and get your take on it?
Sure.
If I was to say then, I'm trying to see if I'm interpreting you right here. If I was to advise someone that wants to start a new pedal company now, and I was to tell them, get a basic circuit that everyone's familiar with it, do minor tweaks to the audio path, but really it's going to come down to your marketing and how the pedal looks. What would you say about that advice given to that person?
I'd be high-fiving you. Honestly, I don't think that's just unique to the pedal world. That's unique to the entire market. It's he who markets the best wins. I mean, Josh at JHS, great example. He kicks everybody's ass on marketing. You know what I mean? And he's creative with his marketing. He's taken some chances that could have, blown up in his face, but they didn't. And JHS is making pretty much the same stuff everybody's making to one degree or another. If you like JHS, that's your thing. If you like Rockett, that's your thing. So nobody's really doing anything better other than the marketing. You know what I mean? So if money is your litmus for success, then I think they're kicking everybody's butt because they're doing really well. But I have nothing bad to say about JHS, Josh, or any of our competitors. Really, I try to learn from them where I can. I know that if I could do what Josh did with a YouTube channel and find the success, I'd love it. But I'd want it to be on its own merits. I wouldn't want to go out and try to copy what he's done.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And, for me, I feel like I have 3 spare minutes in a day, and to try to put a whole TV show together and do that kind of a thing, it's just tough. Like Mason, you're a whole lot better at it than I will ever be.
Mason's a whole lot better than most at that. Mason's very good at that.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think he's kind of following suit in terms of just the success of marketing for his brand. Yes, there are a lot of pedals, or let's just say there are products out there that are hideously bad products, but they have amazing marketing and they sell. That's just the nature of the beast, I guess. But we've been accused, like somebody said, well, Rockett doesn't really get involved in the community. And it is kind of true. We don't you don't see us at NAMM, in some pedal builders forum. And it's not that we don't want to. It's just we've never even thought about becoming a part of that. We're so drilled down on what we do. And we probably should. But with Mason, I've known him for a long, long time. I don't think we've ever been in competition. I think that we've always helped each other out where we needed help. And I think that's the way the community should be. And I'm not saying that it's not that way, because you do have to kind of compete against each other. But it's fun to have that kind of support and know people within the business, because it inspires me to do something new or something different when I see some of the stuff that Mason might be coming out with, or whomever.
Yeah.
Because it gets tough, as you know, Mason. It's just like, oh my God, can I come up with something that is going to be worth pursuing? Or is it just going to be another overdrive? Is it going to be, like you said, hey, I need a rat, so let's just design a rat? But it gets to the point where you're like, man, if I go too unique, like we've got several designs that are done, ready to go. They're really cool. But we just thought, yeah, well, the 11 people that are going to buy this because it solves that problem, probably not going to be worth going into production. I kind of compare that to, when PRS came out, what an uphill battle they had, because how do you compete with Fender and Gibson, Yeah. And they stuck with it. And now PRS is kind of the third brand,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly difficult. Sorry, go ahead, Grant. I think that because of whatever our internet like timing is, that we're like always just like
There's a bit of a lag
sync
today. Hey.
Yeah,
there is.
Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the one of the ones, even today before the episode, I went on your website again just to refresh, like what's in your product line, because I know the Archer very well, and some of the collaborations you've done, and but I was reminded again today that that you guys make the Clockwork Delay, which is something Mason put me onto ages ago, and the next time I need an analog delay, it's going to be Clockwork. But even that is its own, I don't want to say unique, because I know it has its own, foundations in pedal history and all that, but it's made some modern improvements on, it's the Memory Man, right? Like modern improvements on a Memory Man circuit in a smaller form factor, obtainable price. And I remember Mason, we talked about it on a previous episode and outside of episodes, but only had great things to say about it. And so, yeah, you guys do the Archer, you do some great drives, but you're also doing some really great work outside of that in the delay world as well, which is really cool it's cool to see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a fun project. And, it's funny, that was literally the evolution of the Memory Man, because that Clockwork we designed in conjunction with Howard Davis, and things like the separate speed and depth control for modulation, that was his design. I mean, basically, he said, these are all the things that I really wanted the Deluxe Memory Man to become. And we are coming out with a newer version of it soon enough. because we wanted to live with, like with the Klon, people say, well, it's true bypass and it's causing, there's kind of a classic thing called heterodyning sometimes when you get a Klon circuit mixed up with a, some sort of a digital device. It can cause that. And people will say, well, why didn't you do this and why did you do that? I'm like, well, because we wanted to give you a Klon and you got to take the bad with the good. And so that's what they got. And that was kind of what we did originally with the Clockwork. Is there were things about the deluxe memory man that were kind of unsavory. Like there's a volume drop on the input. There's nothing you can do about it. And, depending on whether it's a 70s, 80s, or 90s deluxe memory man, they sound totally different from each other. And I think we've been able to live with this Clockwork long enough that we have a bunch of changes that we want to implement to kind of bring it up to date, so to speak, but still have that classic sound and more options.
I'll be first in line when it comes out.
I'll send you one. So it's on me.
Well, really
I want to ask Chris about one more thing, but before we do, I want to talk about a few more sponsors that make the podcast possible every single week. I'll turn it back over to Grant.
Thanks, Mason. So I want to tell you guys firstly about mono creators. These are, in my mind, if I'm looking for a soft bag, whether it's for my guitar or my pedal board, there is nowhere else to look. So I go to monocreators.com for anything soft bagged, but they also do a line of slim pedal board power supplies, as well as angled boards, which are some of my favorite in the market. The main reason, there's another angled pedal board manufacturer out there that rhymes with Schmidl-Schmain, and they're great. They're lightweight, they're strong, but the mono ones have even more room underneath. And that is one of my favorite things because I can put some of our junction boxes, bigger power supplies, all sorts of things underneath the mono pedal boards. So big fan of everything that mono is doing. And they come with the best quality as well in the industry. On the soft bags, I know Brian can relate as well as Mason here. I think Brian has a whole walk-in closet full of mono bags at this point. Yeah. But the zippers never fail. What's that?
I have pants made out of mono.
Exactly. The zippers on these things never fail. They just keep going for years and years. So big fan of mono creators. Use the code Chairmen if you like to save money. CHAIRMEN for 10% off of anything at monocreators.com. Also want to tell you guys about BTPA or Bestronix. Our good friend Brad over there at BTPA will help you out with anything pedal board accessory related, whether you need plugs, jacks, cables, anything to build out your board, D-sockets, side panel mounts. Brad can help you out over at BTPA. So use the code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS for 10% off. I know all of us go to BTPA almost weekly and are having conversations with Brad, and he's helping us out all the time. So check him out, ask for Brad, tell him the Chairman sent you, and use the code DACHAIRS. Throw it back to you, Mason.
So, Chris, I know we've spent time on a few different things. I just want to remind everybody that if they're interested in checking out any of the Rockett pedals, we'll have links to their website as well as where you can purchase them from our friends over at Sweetwater, in addition to some other dealers that they have available, including the Guitar Sanctuary, one of our sponsors. So you'll have a few different options of places that you can get them, including the Archer and many of the other devices that they sell. But one thing I like asking pedal manufacturers is, are there any brands or models of pedal, Chris, that you feel like has either been sort of missed or undervalued, or that is deserving of more people's attention or should be on more pedal boards and just isn't? Are there any pedals out there that you think kind of fit this bill? Because I feel like, because of the conditions that you mentioned, like marketing as being sort of this big X factor, it makes great circuits sort of die on the vine because they don't understand that world of the industry. And it's not enough to just make a good pedal. You have to make a good pedal and be able to have the understanding to know how to get people to know that it exists. And so are there any pedals or brands that you feel like people should know about but don't?
Oh yeah, there are. I know that I've owned a lot of your stuff that I really like, but I don't consider you a brand that people don't know about. You know what I mean? So if I were to pick, it's funny. Do you know Owen Barry by chance?
Yeah, yeah.
He's a great guy too.
Formerly LA, now Nashville.
Correct. Yeah, he's making a cool little fuzz pedal on his own, just a one knob little fuzzer. That's cool. What's the company? I had the guy from Espresso Effects. I think he's in Italy.
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made me a custom fuzz pedal that's like every fuzz you can think of under the sun in one box. Super cool. I don't think he gets enough attention. I think some other guys out there, because a lot of them have become more prominent now, like jam pedals and a lot of the European manufacturers that we don't hear as much about over here, but there's some great stuff out there. But again, for me, it always just comes down to a subjective nature. What appeals to me may not appeal to you, but I do appreciate the companies that take the time to make the pedals look good. But then again, I also appreciate the guy that takes a die-cast box and writes everything in on a Sharpie. There's something cool about that too. So,
or remember the Dymo labels, those things as well. Yeah.
Owen does that.
The Dumbleoid uses those.
Yeah. Owen does it on his stuff too.
Awesome.
Yeah. Where they're like embossed, kind of.
The plastic kind of embossed, textured labels.
Yeah. So I think Owen, myself, and Sean Tubbs are gonna start our first foray into some videos. We're gonna we're trying to get a thing set up with Neil Giraldo because he owns 3-Chord Whiskey, and we're gonna do a show here called Cigars, Guitars, and Bourbon. And we already did the pilot with Sean Tubbs and Mark Lettieri and Joe West, and it was a 3-camera shoot here on this deck that I'm sitting on right now. We didn't know what we were doing at all. And it was literally just Joe asking questions, whatever he could think of, Sean and Mark, and they're all drinking bourbon and smoking cigars and pipes. And it was just totally organic. There was no script whatsoever. But man, we went back and watched the single camera feed and it was awesome. And I'm like, that's what we need to do. It's real. It's, it's some of the stuff you're like, ooh, probably shouldn't put that on, the internet. But at the same time, that's where the best stuff comes from. Like there was one scene where Joe's like, so what do you guys think of Jeff Beck? And they're all, getting on their knees and doing the bowing and all that. And they're like, oh, he's the best. And Joe goes, yeah, I just don't get it. I've never been a Jeff Beck fan. And you could just see John and Mark getting ready to kick Joe over the ledge of the deck. And it was funny. So, and I think Tom Bukovac has hit upon, a great success in just filming himself with an iPhone. I don't think people care so much about production. I think it's more appealing to be in the living room of somebody that, you don't know, that is an idol of yours or somebody you look up to or whatever. So they can see Tom Bukovac being Tom Bukovac. And I assure you, everything you see on those videos, as you know, Mason, that's Uncle Larry to a T. And I think that's why he's so successful, because he's just giving the world himself,
Yeah.
There's no acting, there's no nonsense to it all, and I think that's appealing.
I think it takes a certain person too, though. Like his personality has a certain sort of low-key effervescence that is very contagious. And for those of us who, had visited him when he used to have his store and stuff like that, these are sort of the conversations that would just be going on between people, where he's but now he's imparting his wisdom to, now I think he's got over 100,000 subscribers of stuff that, started during the pandemic with a horizontal iPhone in his garage. And I think he's already moved to, he's on his 3rd place, I think, since the when he started. It's been really cool to see. I mean, I haven't, in honesty, watched every episode, but when I can, I try to sit down and do it, because there's always some interesting takeaway, and he's just this sort of endless fountain of of knowledge and wisdom, and gives you this little nugget, that you get at the end of the 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is. So yeah, he's
and
really
it's been
cool.
interesting since his show. I've seen a lot of the musicians really like come together in Nashville, especially during the COVID thing. So like, you see Tom and Guthrie doing all sorts of things together now, and sometimes Billy Gibbons is in the mix, and they're always having some sort of a thing, whether it's Guthrie's what's the underdog thing that he does. You've been to that, right, Mason? Yeah, and it's great. I mean, we went down there, and it's like Guthrie and Tom and Michael Landau and Kirk Fletcher, and it's in an environment where they could all just be themselves. Nobody cared, on that, give me your autograph level. People were just there hanging out, and you didn't used to see that even before the pandemic. There's still a lot of competition, but it seems like they all realize that they're better as a unit versus by themselves when it comes to the social media marketing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I'm so appreciative for you coming on for talking us through, the Archer and sort of its development and sort of the affiliation in the early days with the KTR and Bill Finnegan, and talking about original circuits and pedal brands and stuff like that people should know about. So we'll make sure that we also link Owen Barry's, I think they're called like OTB, I think is the pedal, and then Espresso Effects. If people want to check those out. I know that I follow Espresso Effects on Instagram, so they're, I'm certainly seeing sort of their really nicely polished enclosures and stuff like that, and fuzzes and things, and they look beautiful. So thank you so much for being here.
It's Espresso with EX.
Got it.
Not like the coffee drink.
Right.
X is for extreme.
Because people will start looking for his pedals and get nothing but coffee.
It's still a win.
Bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
That would be a good idea for him to package his pedals in coffee grounds.
Right.
Or his coffee bags.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I like that. Good idea.
That'd be funny, but hey, I appreciate it, and it was great to meet. Obviously Mason, not you, but it's great to meet both of you, and I'll certainly, now that I know who you are and what you do, I could certainly refer people your way. Hey, by the way, I was going to ask you, since you're in Vancouver, Grant, whatever happened to the guy that made those buffers? Axis Electronics. Wasn't he in Vancouver?
No, he's in Toronto.
To be honest, I haven't lived here. Yeah, I think he's over on the other side. Everyone lives in Toronto. Toronto's the big city.
Yeah.
I've only
still
recently
around,
come back.
Yeah, he used to be with Mesa, and then he went off to do his own thing, and he also does customer service with RJM.
Okay, yeah, because those were great buffers.
Yeah,
he still does them.
Yeah,
he's got like a newer update to the BS2 that's kind of more of like a multi, like input and output buffer, sort of thing.
Sure.
And then custom sort of versions thereof. Yeah, he's still around. I can connect you with him, Chris.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, just for me personally, because I'm actually going to build out a board for myself one day.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm the worst.
It's great to meet you as well, Chris. This was this was a lot of fun. A lot of insight.
I appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't babble on too much.
No, it was great.
It was great.
All right.
Well, until next time,
all right, guys.
we'll see you guys.